I caught that. Okay. Go back to I thought I did. Try that again. Okay. Arrow it. All right. All right.
So Chris Kennedy, the fish biologist, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, over the last 6 years, fortunate enough so I get paid to go hiking, backpack, and fishing all summer long. So this is a pretty, sorry, hook and line sampling. I can't get paid to go fishing. I'm probably, pretty knowledgeable in the fishery and the farm. I also consider myself a fish historian. I've done a lot of research on the history of fish in Rocky Mountain National Park and the state of Colorado. So that's going to show in this presentation. So traditionally, this is the state of Colorado. Traditionally, it was thought that this was the native distribution of cutthroat trout in the state of Colorado. Greenback cutthroat trout is native to South Platte and Arkansas River drainages, Rio Grande was native to the Rio Grande drainage. The Colorado River cutthroat trout was native to all the waters west of the continental divide. And then there was also a fourth subspecies of cutthroat trout called the yellow cutthroat trout, which was thought to be only in Twitch Lake, south of Leadville. This has kind of been blown up, and I'll get to that later in the presentation. As I said, Greenback was thought to be native to South Arkansas River drainage. It was thought to be extinct, and this publication here stated that it would be very hard to find a pure greenback cutthroat trout in the wild. And that was mostly due to introduction of non-native trout species. And that's what this document says. It says that stocking of closely related fish is the reason for the decline. We do know that when non-native brook trout, we have here, and brown trout are in a stream together with native cutthroat trout, they will displace them over time. There are a number of different subspecies of cutthroat trout, which can hybridize with greenbacks, and thus they're not greenbacks anymore. And then they can also hybridize with rainbow trout. So rainbow or cutthroats are believed to be descendants of rainbow trout, so they can hybridize as well. So when you stock those in a stream, they can hybridize, and thus they're no longer pure greenback cutthroat trout. Currently, it's listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. However, there is only one self-sustaining population left in existence right now. So it's in kind of a perilous position right now. And so to try and keep these from going extinct and then kind of rebound them, you have to do restoration projects. You have to try and get more populations out there, out on the lands. And this is an extremely difficult and time-consuming experience to do one of these restoration projects. As I mentioned, these fish cannot be in a stream with any of these non-native species. So you have to find some place where there's a fish migration barrier, like a waterfall or a cascade, that those non-native fish will not get out. And then you have to remove any fish that are in those areas. And you can do it by two ways. You can do it by chemical means, a pesticide, which is a chemical that you can like drip in the water. It is very toxic to fish and it will kill them if they're in flowing water. Or you can do it by mechanical means. You can go in there and physically remove the fish in streams. You can do electrofishing, which is it's like a backpack unit. It puts electric current in the water. There's never a bad day of fishing with 800 volts. Or in lakes, you can do gill netting to remove them. For the pesticide reclamation, that's very time consuming. It involves going if you pick a location where you want to do one of these restorations, and you have to find where all of these fish are. You have to go up all these little tributary streams. You have to look in old beaver ponds and find every single fish or where fish are, and make sure you can get that pesticide in those areas. It takes a lot of water flow readings. You need to know like the volume of flow that is coming down the streams, so you can know how much of the pesticide that you would put in the stream to get the proper concentration to kill the fish, but not overdo it where you're going to affect other things. Time of travel, you need to know how long it takes that pesticide to flow down the stream to do the restoration project, just for logistics purposes. Mechanical reclamations are very labor intensive. I'm involved in one of those right now, and I'll talk about that later. And you just have to keep doing pass after pass after pass until you feel that you've gotten every single fish out of there. Then once you feel like you've removed all of those fish, then you stock pure greenbacks, and you have to have a source for those. Typically, what we have is a captive brood stock. So it's a population that's in a hatchery, and you reproduce those and produce the young fish. And those are based on, those are founded from populations from what we believe to be the purest of the pure greenback population. Keep it down, chair, so I can reach it.
What do you want it? Yeah. Just tell us when. Or do you want to put it back here? Or do you want to? Put it right here on a chair.
So this is the outline of Rocky Mountain National Park. So there's been a lot of cutthroat trout restoration that is going on in the park. As far as overall fisheries management in the park, how they manage fisheries in the park is pretty much a put and take fishery from 1915, when it was Rocky Mountain National Park was created, until 1968. And that means they just stocked fish into the streams so anglers could take them out. In 1968, there was a major shift in the fisheries management in the park, and they stopped all stocking for recreational fishing. They thought that that was maintaining artificial fish population. And they thought that that was against what a national park should be. National parks should be naturally functioning ecosystems. And so also fish would attract people to high mountain lakes, which is very fragile ecosystems. And, you know, fishermen go trampling up there. And then it was a heavy focus from that point on native fish populations, recovering them and eliminating non-native species wherever possible. So after actually starting in the 1950s, they were doing a number of greenback cutthroat trout restoration projects. There's 13 of them that were done. That's what all of these are. East of the Divide, and they actually did 2 on the west side of the park for Colorado River cutthroat trout. And the focus for Greenback recovery focused on Rocky Mountain National Park, but there were other restoration projects going on up the Cooter River and down to the south, or Arkansas River drainage as well. At that time, thought greenbacks were native down there, and it was actually a success story that they thought they were getting close to meeting. You know, when you have a threatened endangered species, you have a recovery plan. And you outline what you think recovery of that species, subspecies is, and you set goals. Well, they were reaching those goals with the greenback. They were thinking that they had enough populations, and they're actually talking about delisting it. Taking it off the endangered species list. Right now, there's only one fish species that have ever been taken off the endangered species list. But John was talking a little bit about the roller coaster of greenback recovery. So, you know, kind of right now we're at the high. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of these restoration projects that were going on during this period. We get to the 1950s. The park's kind of thinking about native cutthroat trout, and they're still put big fisheries. They brought in the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, which is the predecessor organization of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that I work for. So we've been working in Rocky Mountain National Park since 1950s, and they wanted to do a little more scientific stocking, and they also wanted the Bureau of Fisheries to go around the park and see if they could find any remaining native cutthroat trout populations. They found what they thought was a pure greenback cutthroat trout population, the Big Thompson River in Forest Canyon. So if you're up in Rocky Mountain National Park, you're on Trail Ridge Road, you're above tree line, you're driving around, and like you look to the west, there's a big canyon right there. That's Forest Canyon. So these fish were down in the bottom of there. So they thought they were greenbacks. So they went in, they did like a life history study of them. And then the park wanted to replicate those. They wanted to create another population of those fish. So they chose this drainage. This is the Bay Lakes drainage. It's a tributary to the Roaring River. So there's 3 lakes. There's Caddis Lake, Bay Lake, and Baleen Lake. They found cutthroat trout in Caddis Lake. So what they did is they removed the fish out of there. They were Yellowstone cutthroat trout. They went into Forest Canyon, caught a bunch of the fish, helicoptered them out, brought them to the local fish hatchery, and then when the time was ready, they came and they actually, even though they didn't find any fish, they stocked them in Bay Lake. And then over the years, they didn't find any fish in Bay Lake. Then they found them all down here. So the fish obviously preferred that. After a few years, they found stocking records for Forest Canyon. And they assumed that those stockings were Yellowstone cutthroat trout. So they assumed that the fish were in here were Yellowstone cutthroat trout. So they kind of abandoned this area. It was a restoration project, and they stopped over it a couple of times. But this is the first native cutthroat trout restoration project in Rocky Mountain National Park. So Bench Lake and Ptarmigan Creek. This one is actually for Colorado River cutthroat trout, but it's a super interesting project. So my former boss wanted to do this restoration project in this area. And at that time, there was no known pure populations of Colorado River cutthroat trout. He went to an American Fisheries Society meeting. He went to a talk that was given by a state of California fish biologist. And he said, there's this weird cutthroat trout population in Sierra Nevada Mountains, California. And we did some testing and we think they're Colorado River cutthroat trout. And so my boss heard that and he wanted to do this project. So they did some more testing. They found out that they were pure Colorado River cutthroat trout. And so when they dug around a little bit, what they found was this ticket is up here. In the 1930s, the state of Colorado and the state of California did a fish swap. Colorado sent California Colorado River cutthroat trout, and California sent Colorado golden trout. Well, these Colorado River cutthroat trout went to a fish hatchery in Bishop, California. The fish hatchery manager were there. It was like, man, these are pretty unique. I'm gonna just tuck them away. So he found these fishless lakes called the Williamson Lakes, which are kind of close to Mount Whitney. And then there they sat for years and years and years, and nobody really knew what they were. So my boss wanted to use those fish to stop Bench and Ptarmigan Lake. So state of California fish biologists went into Williamson Lakes, caught a bunch of fish. They helicoptered them out of there to Bishop, California. They put them on a plane, flew them to Kremlin, Colorado. They went on a truck, drove from Kremlin to Grand Lake and into Rocky Mountain National Park. Then they put them on this is the helicopter flying into Bench and Ptarmigan Lake. They did that all in one day, and 2 fish died. It was like 300 or so. Unfortunately, my boss didn't remove all the fish out of there. They were Yellowstone cutthroat trout, and now there's a hybrid kind of swarm going on there. But that's kind of a pretty cool story for that. A couple of years later. Across the valley. Oh, yeah. So later on, they discovered that actually probably the best population of Colorado River cutthroat trout in Colorado is Lake Nenita, which is in Rocky Mountain National Park. It's also in the North Inlet drainage. It's just south of this area as far as purity and numbers. But at that point, they didn't know how good the Nenita was. So they had to go with that option. So kind of during this period, how they would try and identify and differentiate between these different trout species and cutthroat trout species was through something called meristic characters. So they were physical features on the fish that and a lot of this work was done by Dr. Robert Benke from Colorado State University. He was considered Dr. Trout. He was like the foremost expert. So him and his students. So he would go into museum specimens that had been collected in the 1800s. And so, you know, before all this stocking, before all this hybridization, and they would do these counts of these different features on the fish. And they determined which features were diagnostic, which ones could differentiate between Colorado River cutthroat trout and Greenback cutthroat trout. And he came up with several pyloric ceca, which are like finger-like projections in the digestive system, basibranchial teeth, which are teeth on the tongue, scale counts. So you count, this is like the lateral line, count number of scales, and then gill rakers, ill arches. So basically my boss, when he didn't really know what these populations were, he'd go out in the woods, collect fish from a population, 10 fish, bring them to Dr. Benke, and they would do these counts. And like, okay, there's 8 pyloric cica, so that falls in the range of the greenback. There's 15 basic branchial teeth. Oh, look at that, falls in the range of greenback. So he would make his determinations based on that. But as we get to the 1980s, 1990s, we get more and more into genetics. And a lot of techniques not very, very good. By the late 1990s, early 2000s, pretty much every subspecies of cutthroat trout had their own geneticists working on it, usually affiliated with a university. We hooked up with geneticists at University of Colorado Boulder, and in particular Jessica Metcalf. She was a PhD student, and she's very gregarious, and she kind of went to all these different geneticists, like, what techniques are you using, what techniques are you using, and so she kind of came up with her own techniques. And in 2007, she came out with this paper. And like I mentioned previously, we were at a high for Greenback recovery. Well, she blew it out of the water. So she was given tissue samples for genetic analysis of all these populations. So each of these fish represent a cutthroat trout population in Colorado. And we're just gonna, for this, so at that time, everything east of the Continental Divide, based on those meristic characters and early genetics, was thought to be greenback cutthroat trout. Everything west of the Divide was considered Colorado River cutthroat trout. So she did her analysis, and she indeed found that these populations broke out into 2 distinct genetic groupings. One she called lineage GB, because she thought it was greenback cutthroat trout, and one she called lineage CR. She thought it was Colorado River cutthroat trout. So the green is lineage GB, and the blue is lineage CR. So again, when she was given the specimens, all of these were considered greenback. But as you can see, a number of these populations came out as lineage CR. And kind of likewise with these, there's one population that came back as lineage GB, but we thought it was Colorado River cutthroat trout. And so we had done all these not me, but they had done all these restoration projects. And I mentioned that there's captive broodstock. The fish that went into those restoration projects came from this captive broodstock, and it was made up of fish from Poudre River, a little south fork of the Poudre River. You can see that she's calling this lineage CR, not greenback. Hunter's Creek, which is in the southeast portion of Rocky Mountain National Park. You can see that's lineage CR. And then the big one is what is the big one? But anyway, so she's calling those lineage CR, Colorado River cutthroat trout. So all of those restoration projects that have been done with the broodstock, they're in question. They're not, according to this, they're not greenback cutthroat trout. So this got out into the press, and so they had a heyday on it, tragedy in trout, so much for trusting the experts. It goes on. Yeah, fine kettle of fish, greenbacks, red faces. It made it into the New York Times. Yeah, and then there was one that actually made it into a comedic newspaper in England, and they had a picture of fish and chips, and they said Yeah, Greenback Cutthroat Trout Fish and Chips, schoolboy error. So, that led to a second study. So the information that those two groups broke out into two distinct groups, that was rock solid. But what those two groups actually were was more in question. So I was involved in this one. This is another paper that came out in 2012, where we kind of investigated what those two groups were. And so what we did is I went looking for these museum specimens. You know, where were cutthroat trout collected in Colorado and then put into a museum? So we found fish in Harvard, Smithsonian Institution, California Academy of Sciences, Philadelphia Academy of Sciences. So these are fish that were collected in 1880s to 1890s. And my part, as I said, I'm a fish historian. So this graph here, this is the years, and then this is the number of fish stock in Colorado. So each of these ticks is a year that a museum specimen was collected. And then these lines are fish stocking in Colorado. So you can see these museum specimens were collected prior to widespread stocking of fish. So presumably those fish are the ones that were historically present in those locations that they were collected. So they went in there, the geneticists took samples. I believe this is the sample from Harvard. They would take a tissue sample, and then they would run the genetics on that, which was an incredibly laborious process. You know, the DNA was highly degraded, so they kind of like piece it together, and then they compared to what we had currently. And to go back to this one again, what was traditionally thought was greenback cutthroat trout were native to Arkansas, South Platte. Everything west of the divide was Colorado River cutthroat, and again, we're north Rio Grande cutthroat. So what she came up with is that, again, this is the state of Colorado. She found that each major drainage in Colorado had its own distinct genetic lineage of cutthroat trout. So this is her document here that was in the paper, and based on this is how we designate things now. So she's saying greenback cutthroat trout are native just to South Platte drainage. There was another distinct lineage of cutthroat trout in the Arkansas River drainage. As I mentioned, there was a fourth one, yellowfin. So she's calling that, let's go with this. She's calling that the yellowfin. And there are no current populations that match up with the museum specimens from this drainage. San Juan drainage, when the paper came out, there were no known current populations that matched up that genetic lineage from the museum specimens. Colorado and Gunnison River drainage, and how we're calling these now is based on this. So the fish from here are called the green lineage. We're very creative, and that's that's blue lineage. So a lot of what we have currently are the blue lineage or green lineage or the blue lineage. And the reason for that is there were large egg collecting operations going on at Trapper and Marvine Lakes. The state was up there for decades. They would collect cutthroat trout eggs, and then they would distribute them throughout the whole state. In the Gunnison River drainage, which is the green lineage, Leadville National Fish Hatchery had egg collecting operations going on at Grand Mesa Lakes from 1899 to 1909, and they distributed tens of millions of eggs out of there. They went all over Colorado. They went into neighboring states. They went into different countries as well. So those two, again, big egg collecting operations, and almost all the fish we have currently are the blue lineage and the green lineage. And then all these purples, these are all the places that we had museum specimens that were used in the study. So we added in all these drainages. And then the blue lineage matches up what she was, the first paper she was calling lineage CR for Colorado River cutthroat trout. But the lineage GB that she was calling greenback matches up with the green lineage. So it's not greenback cutthroat trout, it's not east of divide. So that was a huge piece to this research. The greenback is native to Southland drainage based on this study, but there was only one single population left in existence, and it was here in Bear Creek, which was actually in the Arkansas River drainage. So that was a huge deal. So we're from a high talking about delisting it. Yeah. Sorry. So again, now we're at an all-time low. We got one population that we're trying to do recovery. So we're basically starting all over. So that Bear Creek population was kind of discovered in the 1990s, and they took some tissue samples, gave them to geneticists, taxonomists, and all of them, everyone that looked at it said, these are different than any other cutthroat trout that I've seen. So it got the moniker Weird Bear Creek. And we didn't know why that was until this research study, that it's the last true greenback cutthroat trout population. So I researched and then came up with this paper. So I talked a little bit about that. How did they get there? They're not in their native drainage. So this is the Bear Creek population. It's on the side of Pikes Peak. So Pikes Peak's right over here. Colorado Springs is right here. Arkansas River drainage. This is the divide between the Arkansas River drainage and the South Platte drainage. This is a location of one of the museum specimens that were collected. They match identically to genetically to Bear Creek. So people wanted to get up to the top of Pikes Peak. At that time, there was no road, and it was a 2-day hike to get up there. So the most direct route to Colorado Springs was to go up Bear Creek. So a trail got developed, a bigger trail, and eventually it was kind of like a road. But there was a guy that wanted to capitalize on that. His name was Jones. So he homesteaded 40 acres right on Bear Creek in a place called, right now it's called Jones Park. And that is at the very top of this Greenback Cutthroat Trout population. So his plan was he could build a hotel. People would go up there, you know, he'd feed them, you know, let them spend the night, make some money. He never got around to doing the hotel, but what happened in the 1800s is a lot of people came onto this in Colorado. They spent months out here on their vacation, and some of them wrote a book about it. One of these guys was a reverend. His name was R.T. Cross. So he wrote a book, and he had a chapter in his book about his visit to Jones Park. And in that chapter, he said that I was up in Jones Park. I was talking to Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones had to leave to go and clean rocks out of his fish pond. So this is 1882. So presumably, if you have fish ponds, you have fish. So we do know that there are barriers, fish migration barriers on Bear Creek below this population. Also, in my historical research, it appears that there were no trout that were native to the Colorado Springs area. We do know the drainage north of there was historically fishless. We do know that the drainage south of there was historically fishless. So presumably, Mr. Jones went out, got some fish, and brought them up to Bear Creek. So where did he get those? He could have, again, there's no trout in this area. We do know that up here, this contained trout. This is actually called Trout Creek. So if you're familiar with the area, it's basically Highway 24, goes up here to Woodland Park, over the divide into the South Platte drainage. So he could have himself went over there, collected fish and brought them back. But based on the historical record, we know that there were two fish hatcheries operating in the 1880s. One was right on Trout Creek, so he could have went there, got some eggs, brought those up to Bear Creek. There was also a hatchery in Colorado Springs operated by a guy named Colonel de la Verge. And I have a newspaper article, reporter went there 1880s and visited the hatchery. And he said that Colonel de la Verge had mountain trout. And he went up himself into the mountains, collected those fish, and brought them down. So most likely areas came up here, got fish. So that's kind of the explanation how fish for the South Platte drainage got into Bear Creek. So again, we're starting all over. We have done some work. There are, besides his Bear Creek down here at Colorado Springs, there are 3 current populations of greenbacks that have been founded. Zimmerman Lake, which is up the Cooter. That's a lake that they've used as like a wild fruit stock for years and years. And again, it's a greenback. State goes in there and collects eggs every year. There's 2 populations up near Eisenhower Tunnel. There are 2 drainages right next to each other. Yeah, with the real Greenback Cutthroat Trout, the new Greenback Cutthroat Trout. But there has been some reproduction or recruitment in Herming Gulch that they found, but it could only be like 1 or 2 matings. So we're still saying that Bear Creek is the only self-sustaining population. We also have a new brood stock at the Leadville National Fish Hatchery, which I work at. So that produced fish. And then we work with Mount Chavano, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Hatchery down in Salida. So we kind of spawn the fish up there. They take eggs down there. They're warmer. They can grow them quicker, and then they stock them out in this restoration project. And then there are ongoing greenback restoration projects. Big project up in North Fork of the Cooter, north of Cayles Creek. Cooter Headwaters Project, which is the largest native cutthroat trout restoration project in Colorado history. That's partially in Rocky Mountain National Park, and I'll talk more about that. And then there's another one that's not on this map. I was too lazy to update the map, but I'm doing another project in the southeast part of Rocky Mountain National Park. And then Square Tops, which is up near Winella Pass. I think they actually stocked greenbacks in there this past summer. And then Rock Creek, which is kind of in the north part of South Park. So now we're going to get back into National Park, talk about this Cooter Headwaters project. So there's a lot of bureaucracy type stuff that goes into this project. But Long John Reservoir is part of this project. In 1974, the water company did an enlargement on the reservoir. And in doing so, they did not allow for flow to come out of the dam in the winter. So there was a lot of bureaucracy and temporary permits or whatever. But in 1994, there was supposed to be a 10-year permit issued. I think that's correct. And Trout Unlimited actually sued because did not allow minimum flows to go out the dam. So there was like a mile stretch. There was I guess as part of the enlargement, there was a big basin that was built at the base of the dam, but it did not allow for flows to come out of the dam and keep going downstream. So Trout Unlimited sued. There's about a mile stretch or so that got dewatered in the winter. And so Trout Unlimited sued. They won. Judge Camp comes back and says, you know, you got to do something about this. Forest Service does an environmental impact statement, and instead of making the water company modify the dam or paying to keep Long Draw Road open all winter and having flows come out, which would be multi-million dollars every year to do that, their preferred alternative was to make the water company pay to do native cutthroat trout restoration projects throughout the whole Long Draw Reservoir area. So the water company wasn't happy about that. At first, it was like a blank check. You know, they didn't put sideboards on how much they would spend. And so they're legal wrangling. And then in 2018 is finally when this project started commencing and we started doing work. As I mentioned, it's the largest native cutthroat trout restoration project in Colorado history. It's going to be 37 miles of stream and 106 acres of lake and reservoir for this for Greenback Cutthroat Trout. This is kind of a map of the area. So this is Continental Divide. This area down here is Rocky Mountain National Park. It'll be the Poudre River, Chapin Creek, Willow Creek, Hay Creek, Mummy Pass Creek, and then on the Forest Service, Elm Creek and Neota Creek. And so each of these represents a fish migration barrier. So the green ones are going to be permanent barriers. So this is the downstream most fish migration barrier for the whole project. We're going to put one up here at Continental Divide. So there's a ditch, grand ditch flows into here. Our policy with Fish and Wildlife Service is that you cannot stop out or encourage or allow threatened or endangered species to get outside of their native range. So that's what this barrier is. It's going to prevent greenbacks from going up into this ditch and getting into the Colorado River drainage. And then this is such a large area, you can't do it all at once. So we have to break it up into different parts. And so temporary barriers are going to have to be constructed to break this up. So we have there is a waterfall here at the Poudre River that'll need to be modified to make it a complete barrier. We know it's not a total barrier. They'll construct something at Hay Creek, and then on Corral Creek, they actually constructed one this summer there, this fall. This one was built in fall of 2022. We're going to remove the fish out of there. So that's the project area, but there's a big footprint for this project that goes beyond the actual reclamation area. So as I mentioned, there's a grand ditch here. So this ditch, this is the Never Summer Mountains here. This ditch intersects 13 tributary streams. It runs 7 or 8 miles long. And what has happened in the past is cutthroat trout from Long Draw Reservoir would come up the ditch, they would get into the ditch, they would spawn, produce young fish. And then in the fall, when they would shut the ditch down and dewater it, those fish had to go someplace. So they would go up these drainages or down these drainages. And so there are fish in there that need to be removed. Otherwise, they could move downstream into this Greenback restoration project. And then down here, the ditch starts at Baker Gulch. That has a large population of cutthroat trout in there. This tributary stream, there's a lake at the top of that. It's a shallow lake, and it has brook trout as well. So that has to be, that's phase 1 of the project. That has to be removed. Those fish have to be removed before we can do the rest of it. And there's always drama. So I'll So I'll talk a little bit about that. So as you saw, there was years and years of financial wrangling and stuff like that. So lots and lots of work involved in this. The main barrier that I pointed out, we've done a lot of testing to see if it was a complete barrier that kept all fish out. And what we do is we put tags into fish, so you can wave a reader over it and determine if it has one of these tags in there. And then we would put them below the falls, and then we would set up antennas above this waterfall. And this is most of this is being done. The Forest Service is leading all of this work. I'm just helping out on it. So when I say we, it's mostly the Forest Service and then telling me what to do. They would set these antennas above this waterfall, and so we would collect these fish, tag them, put it below the barrier. And so we did find that fish were indeed getting above this barrier. So there is going to have to be some modifications to this because that is the main barrier. However, in the process, Forest Service found out that it's a very popular place for kayakers to go over, and they don't want any modifications to it. So it's called starter fluid is the name of it. So that's going to have something happen there. Again, I mentioned Grand Ditch is phase 1. So we've done a ton of work with these barrier locations, extent of fish, flows, the time of travel. So this is the time of travel. You put this dye into the stream, and then you follow it downstream and time it. The most not mind-numbing thing I've ever done in my career. As I mentioned, in 2022, they built that barrier there. This past summer, they removed fish out of Greenback Lake. And then we were testing the barrier. We did the same thing with the pit tagging fish, antennas above the barrier, and no fish got over the newly constructed barrier. And then hopefully summer of 2024, they'll remove the fish out of the Grand Ditch, Baker Gulch, and all the tributary streams. Started looking at Corral Creek this past summer. They constructed the temporary barrier there. We looked at extent of fish. Forest Service was talking about trying to squeeze that removal of fish into 2024. Now we've also done a lot of work on the Poudre River. So I've collected a lot of that data. So busy slide. I hope I got through it quick. And so, as I mentioned, there's always drama. So in the decades-long legal process for this thing to get going, Colorado Parks and Wildlife decided they were not happy with the environmental impact statement. And in the environmental impact statement, this is Baker Gulch down here. It said that fish were going to be removed from there and nothing was going to be put back in there to make sure that nothing went in and destroyed the multi-million-dollar Poudre Headwaters project. Well, they didn't agree with that. They felt that they were going to be people were going to be losing fishing opportunity. So we kind of went back and forth. And, the bureaucrats went back and forth. And then there was also a thing where they're like, Baker Gulch is there. They would have to go 7 to 9 miles down this ditch to get into there. There's no way they can do that. So the Forest Service was working with a professor at CSU, Dr. Yoichiro Kano, and there was a grad student that was working on this Poudre Headwaters project. It was a genetics project. So the head of the Forest Service biologist said, hey, can we look at the cutthroat trout in this area and look, where they're moving to? So we collected tissue samples. And so these are cutthroat trout here, cutthroat trout in the ditch, cutthroat trout. This is Neota Creek, which is a tributary off of the Long Jaw Reservoir. This is like Laputa Pass Creek upstream of the reservoir, and then this is down below the reservoir. So when they ran the genetics on these cutthroat trout population, they found that there was two distinct genetic groupings. This purple was distinct to Baker Gulch, and then the yellow was distinct to like the Long Draw area. So these pie charts are basically the percentage of fish that represent each of those groups. So what this says is that Baker Gulch has very little influence by the fish that are down here. But what we found in the Grand Ditch has a big, strong influence. This yellow is the fish down here, a very big influence from these fish, but also an influence from Baker Gulch. And then there's influence from Baker Gulch down here. So this says that these Baker Gulch fish are indeed coming down here and infiltrating down here. So that was kind of proof positive that, you know, that theory that, you know, nothing could get down there. So that's science at work right there. And then the drama with this, what I decided was that we're going to stock sterile brook trout in there that are capable of reproducing the greenbacks. So the other project, looks like everybody's still awake, so I'm going to keep going. There's another project that I'm working on. This is at Upper Ouzel Creek. It's in the Wild Basin area of Rocky National Park, southeast part of the park. It is a very small section. So Ouzel Creek was one of those Greenback Cutthroat Trout restoration projects, the old Greenback. It has been infiltrated with brook trout, so there's very few cutthroats left. But above Ouzel Lake, there is a fish migration barrier, and above that, it's only cutthroat trout. There's also other barriers here, and then there's no fish above these barriers here. So we're trying to mechanically remove fish out of there using electrofishing. So it's only about 1.3 kilometers of habitat. It has solid barriers that we know are barriers to fish migration. And again, we're using electrofishing and not chemicals. The park has not approved the use of chemicals anywhere in the park outside of the Poudre Headwaters project. And you can only do this type of project in a small section of the stream and very simple habitat. And that's what we have up here. So we've been at it for just a couple more photos. It's a really cool area, lots of waterfalls, nice slab. That would be alone. Obviously, PowerPoint didn't like you. It changed on its own. And then other photos fish that we collect. So kind of these are the results. So we started in 2020, removed 535 fish. We did 8 to 10 passes through the streams to get those fish. And then YOY are young of the year. So those are fish that were spawned in a given year. So if there's spawning going on, those fish are going to keep the project going. It's much more difficult to electrofish and catch young fish. So cutthroat trout are spring spawners, and we didn't get up there to start this until after they spawn. And then on August 27th, we saw these young of the year fish. Not really surprised by it. So 2021 caught 274. Did not see any young of the year. So our goal for 2020 was to stop reproduction. So we put in that big effort to remove all the mature fish so they would not reproduce. So 2022, down to 18 fish, only had one pass, no young of the year. 2023, only caught one fish. There were 2 other ones that were observed. They probably got a little extra dose of electricity, so they may not have survived. And again, no young of the year. I had some medical issues those years, so that's why the effort is not there. But we're still online. We did disease testing up there. Obviously, you don't want any diseases in any of these. There are end of each year, there still were fish in there. And again, it was labor intensive. Keeping track of all the hours that we're doing, not to mention all the extraneous stuff. We have mule packers packing us in and out all the time, so that's extra hours. I really think that we can finish this project off, at least the removal part of it, by 2024. Again, there's one fish. They saw two other fish, and they were very far apart from each other. So we're also incorporating environmental DNA into this project. That's where you collect samples from the environment and try and detect DNA of certain species. So what we do is we go up there, we filter a lot of water, and then a genetics lab will go through that and see if they detect cell-mounted DNA there. So we're going to use that. Our goal, or the way we think that we're going to know that it's complete is we do 2 passes over the entire length of this project area and not see or capture a fish. We also have the eDNA to also, if that doesn't pick up any cell-mounted DNA, that's another indicator that we've reached our goal. There's issues with that though too. There could be dead fish in there that keep sloughing off DNA. So we'll see what drama that brings. Yeah.
Couple of years, I know that.
All right. So for those of you that are not, you prefer charts over tables. Basically, this is on the x-axis here are size classes of fish that we capture, and then on the y-axis are the number of fish that we captured each of those size ranges. The yellow bars are 2020. So again, we had these younger the year fish here that we captured. The biggest size class we had in 2020 were these. This is like 105 meters. And then you can see we had all these adult fish. I would consider like 180 millimeters and above is female fish that are mature and capable of producing eggs. Males, just like humans, they're ready to go before the females, they're ready to go after the females. So that's kind of my target there. So again, remove those 500 plus. 2021, no younger year, which is really good. These young of the year that we had 2020, they've grown up, and now they're at like 70 millimeters. So that was our biggest group. These ones have become this size now, so you can tell we're not super efficient at catching that size, so it became this size. But then you see there's hardly any adults here. There were a few big ones, but fortunately they were spread out enough in the stream that they didn't feed each other and produce young fish. And then 2022 there's 18 fish, and then 2023 just the 1 fish. All right, so that's all I have. Yes. Above gas falls. There are probably some still in there, but not many. It's very, what's that? It's very cold up there, and I had some fly fishing guys tell me that there's still fish up there. We did some of that eDNA testing up there and did get hits, lower down above the falls. So they're probably still in there, but not too many of them. So it's. Yeah, I mean, it appears that geneticists are the only ones that really can differentiate between what is what. So probably not. That population in Zimmerman Lake, you can fish for those up there, by the way. It has kind of crashed, so there's not very many in there. The other populations cannot. And that was also a concern about Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So, like I said, it's currently threatened, but since we only have that one population, we have a 5-year review where we have to review everything. And with that single population, there's no doubt that it's going to have to go to endangered. And under the Endangered Species Act, you can fish for a federally threatened species, you cannot fish for an endangered species. But our people are at the request of CPW or the harassment of CPW. Our agency is working up something that you will be able to fish for greenbacks, even though they're endangered. These new populations still will not be able to fish for them. We need to make sure that they're secure before they're gonna release. No. Yes.
Define the fish removal.
Fish removal. That's removing fish. So removing all the fish. And there's those methods that I mentioned, the chemicals or the mechanical removal. So since non-native brook, rainbow or brook and brown trout will displace cutthroat trout over time, and they can other subspecies of cutthroat trout, rainbow trout can hybridize. All of those non-native fish cannot be in an area with greenbacks. So we have to remove all of those fish before you can stop.
You plant them somewhere else?
It depends. We do sometimes they open up regulations so people can go in there and fish. The Baker Gulch project, they do have in place. Those are blue lineage, and this year Colorado Parks and Wildlife remove fish from a stream over in the Yampa White River drainage, and unfortunately they get all the fish out. We were planning on collecting those fish, cutthroat trout from Baker Gulch, put them in a truck and then driving them over to that stream, stocking them out, relocating them. But then they found out that they didn't remove all the fish, so that got postponed until 2024. So we will go up there. Those cutthroat trout before they do the chemical treatment. We'll go in there with electrofishers, catch as many of those as we can, put them in trucks, and truck them and stock them into that. So there's, and then regulations. So I would envision like Long Jaw Reservoir, when it comes time to remove the fish out of there, they'll draw the reservoir down as far as it'll go, and then open it up for fishing. Don't limit the fishing.
So once you started the reintroduction process, what is the greatest limitation to
Probably not eliminating all the fish.
it's still invasive?
Yeah, I mean, I showed all those greenback restoration projects that were done. They were done in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Probably 7 of those 15 either been reinvaded by brook trout that were not totally removed, or there's influence by like Yellowstone cutthroat trout that were not removed. Now they're embedded in the genetics. We believe it's that they spawn at a different time. So in a stream, largest fish are going to have the best feeding positions. And at the other end, smallest fish are going to have the worst feeding positions. So brown and brook are fall spawners. They get going on spawning in fall. And then they kind of, when winter comes, they kind of suspend development. And then cutthroat or spring spawning. So those fall spawners have a head start on the spring spawning cutthroats. So when they hatch out, they're bigger than the cutthroat trout and fry. So they push them out of suitable habitat. That's what they think is going on. And usually cutthroat trout and fry disappear in the winter. So it's not something you can easily research. You know, if you open up a stream, take the snow off, take the ice off, you're altering habitat. So it's hard to come up with a really good study to see what's going on.
What's the, like, thinnest water you throw streamers on?
What's that?
What's the thinnest water you're throwing streamers on in like Rocky Mountain?
I do 800 volts on streams like that wide. Actually, I don't. We did have a research project looking at the competition between brook trout and cutthroats back in 2000, 2001. This researcher did a lot of stomach pumping, and I think in the whole study she only found one fry in the stomach. So it doesn't seem like they're predating. So yes.
What was the final decision about Parika Lake, like every summer? Are those going to remain barren? Or?
Everything Parika Lake, the state is going to stop sterile brook trout to maintain a fishery in there. Every so often, yes. So they're developing this, they call them YY brook trout, and so that's what they're going to put in there periodically.
Probably the sort of sheds in the 50s to 60s quarters to make that trout populations is not like a Rocky Mountain National Park thing, but bigger trends in conservation.
Yeah, that's bigger trends. And actually, if you go back to the 1930s, they were thinking about that. So creation of Rocky Mountain National Park in 1915 actually predates the creation of National Park Service by a year. And so there was no guidance on how to manage fisheries in the park. So they just kept doing what they were doing before the park. And it took to the mid 1930s before the Park Service came out with any guidance on how to manage fish. But there was a document in the mid 1930s that basically it was they weren't directing the park how to manage fisheries, but they suggested that they should stop stocking non-natives and stock only native fish and stop stocking historically fishless waters. So it kind of goes back to the 1930s. Fortunately, with the park, they followed that recommendation. They pretty much only stocked cutthroat trout, but they're stocking a non-native subspecies of cutthroat trout, Yellowstone cutthroat trout. So they stocked 1930s into the 1960s. They were stocking Yellowstone cutthroat trout. So that idea of going native back to the 1930s. So, but it was still the focus was on fishing. You know, put fish in, take them out. And right now, there are very few things that you can take out of a national park without some kind of specialized permit. Fish is one of them, I believe. Mushrooms, you can pick mushrooms for immediate consumption. I think you can pick berries for immediate consumption. Those are the only, as far as I know, those are only 3 things that you can take out of a national park. Yes.
Is there any progress?
I have no idea. All right, I can keep you around a little bit. So, like I said, I do the fisheries field work at National Park. Rocky Mountain National Park is incredibly cheap, and they don't pay us very much. So I'm the only guy that's doing this, and so I rely very heavily on volunteers to get this field work done during the summer. So this is, you know, an ask for help here. John volunteers, incredible amount of time with me to do this work here. I have not, in 26 years, I have not had a paid technician that's helped me out. It's pretty much all been volunteers, occasionally some Park Service technicians and stuff. So some of the stuff you would do is
This is the good stuff.
yeah, and amazingly, these projects I get the most volunteers on. I can't figure it out. We do this, so usually every year I do 1 or 2 projects where I try to estimate the number of fish in one of the lakes. And it's usually a 2-week project, a week and a half. We just go and do hook and line, get volunteers, catch as many fish as we can. We clip off part of their fin and put it back in the lake so we can uniquely identify them. And at the end of the project, we'll do net surveys on that lake. And based on the number of fish that are marked versus unmarked with the nets, I can estimate how many fish are in the lake. So that's always a popular one.
Camping, Rocky Mountain National Park. You don't have to do anything other than show up. Permits, all that, you don't have to mess with. So it's really, really, you don't have to try to be scheduling, doing a lottery to try to get a campsite or anything like that. He's taking care of all that. You just show up and then.
Well, you're responsible for all your own gear, all your own camping gear, your hook and line gear, your food. But in my older age, I always keep finding an excuse to use the Rocky Mountain National Park mules to carry the gear up. So, you can always, you can disguise a 12-pack of beer, or, anything. You get creative, MacGyver and stuff like that. Our typical way of surveying streams is electrofishing, as I mentioned before. There's these backpack units that puts an electrical current in the water, which you do it right, you temporarily stun fish, and then you net them out. If you don't do it right, you have fish fry. We have almost zero immediately. Sometimes maybe there might be mortality down the line. Actually, fish's muscles work on electrical impulses. So this electricity makes them involuntary swim sometimes. Like if you're in a big pool, you pull them out from undercut. It's sometimes that causes spinal injuries if they're violently swimming. But we have very, very little mortality with this. If we do, it's smaller fish. But it's very low mortality. Netting is one of our main method on lakes to outside of these mark recapture population estimates. So last year I almost drowned that moose. It went across the lake, and then there's Trowbridge Road. All these visitors came. Moose decided it didn't want to be on that side of the lake, so it went back and then the lake, crossed my net line, and it was out in the middle of the lake. Struggling. Oh, it was my last day of work here, and it made it back to the other side, and it did have the net like wrapped around its one foot, but it just walked out. So no moose deaths. So that's typically what we do on lakes, and then we weigh fish, get legs, and record data. And it depends on what the project is about. Sometimes we'll take tissue samples for genetics or contaminants or something like that. And like John said, and I mentioned before, like the parks fishery management is mostly about cutthroat trout populations. So those are the areas that we work at. And again, they have to be up above those fish migration barriers. So you're talking usually about headwater areas. So that's kind of usually far back into the woods. So it's falls and so hiking. Usually we kind of go in on Monday, camp out, come out on Friday. At the front and the back, we have more sometimes day trips, or at the end, we have electric fishing surveys that are like where we're looking at places that were affected by the wildfires, 2020, the flooding, 2023. Those are closer. There's some that are right off the road. But during the heart of the season, it's usually a week long in the backcountry. We're camping out. So just beautiful scenery. So if that interests you, and also another thing I got going on. So have you heard about this thing called climate change? I do have about 50 water temperature loggers located throughout the whole park, and I cannot change those out by myself. So I have another group of volunteers that they'll go in and switch out these temperature loggers for them. I have, you know, some of them are along the road, some are accessible as day hikes. Some are pretty deep in there that require backpacking. And I do have access to backcountry campsites before they open to the public. So this is something that you can do on your own. Yeah. You know, these two went out and got a bunch of them for me this year. I got them a camp permit. So if that's of interest to you as well, give me a call or give me an email. So I basically just give you the logger itself is only about this big, give you a wrench, give you a coordinate, and give you great directions. Like it's cabled to a tree by the rock. I've had some upset people come out of the woods.
One of the things he had was Columbine Creek.
Yeah, he's got stars on his plate. All right, so that's all I have. Yeah.
You know, socialize if you want, but our meetings.
Sorry, I made you move all your equipment.
Should be back at the other location. They just had, we had a conflict. They had, Eldora had a huge event.
That gets-